Hi, thank you all for joining us today. I'm Jordan Roth, and I'm here with Yuliya Lanina, and I'm very happy to have you here today for the talk. We've really enjoyed this show thus far, and I guess we'll kind of jump right in. So you've had quite a lot of experience in art and in life. You immigrated from the Soviet Union and arrived here. You've had numerous residencies, performances. You've exhibited throughout the country. How does this exhibition kind of, uh, how does this land in terms of like your entire body of work?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and it's been such a pleasure to be in in the gallery, and I'm very happy with the show and your vision also for the show. So thank you. Um, yeah, so I feel like for me, the visual art really started when I moved to this country. So before I was actually studying music, and then when I came to United States, I didn't speak English very well, and art became my form of communicating my feelings and my thoughts. And I feel like, it still is, that way. So in some way, through 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 art, I talk about what's inside. So and the work that you see here, it's been done over a number of years. Some of it very recent, some of it, not so. And but the themes and sort of the stories, they all, come back around. So in some way, some of the things that maybe I've done earlier, they resonate with the things that, I've done recently. So I don't know, does it really answer the question?
Well, it's a culmination of
Yeah.
everything. It seems like.
Yeah.
You told me about the works
Hmm.
up front here with the eyes
Yeah.
and the bodies.
Hmm.
Like explain what these were costumes at one point, right?
Yeah, so some of these, especially the bigger sculptures, some of them have costumes that I wore. So, a lot of my work starts with painting, and then those paintings become animations that you can see in the room I perform. So some of the paintings become the costumes, and then some of the costumes become the sculptures. So some of the paintings also become music boxes, and everything informs each other. So this work that you see at the beginning, so the idea of the body being the storyteller is very much present in my work, because our life experiences, our memories, they're stored in the bodies. And so I wanted to give kind of the microphone to the body, and that's why you see like the face on the body. And so um the same thing with the piece behind us. It's they're different portraits, but they're within one body. Um, and so the body is a storyteller. Also, in animations, you can see, the kind of the body like opening the curtains, and then the story is happening inside. Um, and the idea of also observing and being observed. So the gaze, looking at, being looked at, kind of being aware of being looked at. So all of these things, they're also part of the work here. And I wanted to also talk a little bit about the Broken Lullabies, the kind of how that came about. So lullaby is something that, is associated with childhood, with safety, with holiness. And, in everybody's life, there comes a point where kind of this, this idea of safety that we perceive is being broken. And then we're left with what's afterwards. And so the theme is not so much like let's look at the brokenness, but at what happens after that happens. And so in some way, this sense of wholeness, right, that we have as a kid, when that falls apart, then we're to construct ourselves from like little pieces. And so this idea of then constructing yourself, your identity, understanding of the world, a lot of times from things that are maybe not even supposed to go together. Um, but it's like reconstruction of self. This is what is like behind a lot of these things.
And the Broken Lullabies are these works over here.
Yeah, I feel like in some way all of it is, what happens after the lullaby is broken, right? And so this kind of reconstructed identities that you can see in all of these works here.
And you'd mentioned, like in conversation, that the vegetable
Mhm.
heads were kind of just like an inanimate object that ends up being a companion or someone to talk to.
Yeah, so I grew up in Soviet Union, which then became Russia, where I grew up. And in Eastern Europe, there's always the fairy tales where the objects and the fruit and the couch and all these things, they talk to you. So there's like a soul and in all of the things that surround you. So it's not unusual to have the wind have a conversation with you, or the plant or the bird. So I think in that way, I incorporated all of different forms, right, into the work, because they're just as part of like conversation as the humans are.
But it seems like, so you've got all these figures here, and
Mhm.
they're presenting themselves in this form, and it's interesting. I hadn't even really thought of it until you mentioned now, but the Broken Lullaby, I think a lot of people experience that now.
Mhm.
And maybe something that occurred beginning around the pandemic and then just keeps
Mhm.
getting weirder.
Right.
And these uncanny figures, I mean, I almost could see associating with that kind of like
Mhm.
what's going on here, and then going back to an elemental like childhood like feeling
Mhm.
of, well, this is how I'll make sense of it. Is that sort of like what you're trying to present?
Yeah, I feel like absurdity, right, is very much like present here. And for me, like with the life experience where, the immigration, then I lost my mom pretty young. She was actually my age when she died, and I was 19. So, in some way, the idea of life is supposed to be a certain way, or like the linear kind of trajectory of life didn't really happen. And so, in some way, like it was the absurdity of life that what, became present for myself, for me.
So with that in mind, it's interesting. So you teach a class
Mhm.
on humor and art.
Human storytelling, yeah.
So you've used absurdity and humor as
Mm.
almost a coping mechanism, but also an artistic tool.
Yeah, I feel like humor is definitely a coping mechanism. And it's also, talking about not making light of the things, but actually being able to process things and in a way that's manageable. I'm so distracted by the music, by the way. It's like very hard to focus.
We could, yeah, we'll take care of that.
Um, Yeah, because I started listening to the music and then I'm like, la 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 la. And talking about the music, since we talked about, the animations, right? They're a big part of the work. And I collaborate with composers. And so on each of the project, there's a different composer that I work with. And so I love it because then they add their own storytelling and through sound. So I feel like through collaboration, the work actually becomes so much richer. And the same thing with performances too. There's a different level of storytelling that is being added through the performance. So anyway, that's talking about the thing that was distracting us. What was the question?
It was about like humor and
Oh
absurdity,
yes,
and yeah, how that plays into everything, life and
yeah,
then work.
yeah. So I feel like through humor is a way to kind of live through difficult things. And in fact, being from Soviet Union, it was pretty tough place to live in. And there were whenever people get together, the first thing you do, you tell jokes to each other. So like that was the way to kind of coping with things. And maybe some of the jokes I was trying to tell people when I came to the United States, they're like, this is not funny. But it's funny because you like this is your life. So you have to make funny of things that are not funny. Um, In fact, they say that, the more depressed societies, there are more jokes that come out of that. So you can sort of gauge how badly things are going by how many jokes
That's all you can
out
do,
there.
right? Yeah.
Because, yeah, like, what are you supposed to do? And so, and then through the jokes, then everything becomes livable. So I think humor is definitely a really important coping mechanisms that we have.
And I'm seeing it now more than I was before in this body of work, the Unbroken series,
Yeah.
because they're definitely provoking and they're like engaging with the viewer. I'm seeing the humor more than I was before.
Yeah.
And tell us about that series there.
Yeah, I mean, the series is very much about it's about transformation, right? And also like kind of the passages in life, from adolescent into adulthood, from young to middle age, and also from life to death. And that's because kind of where things are at in my life. Because my mom died my age, so I think about that a lot. And now my kids, I have twins who are 14, so they're coming from like childhood to being adolescent to adults, and myself kind of where I'm at, from being young to being older. And so I think about this like transformation a lot. And so you can see some of the figures have like have a life, have skeleton, and all kinds of things. um and the head, actually, that is the face of the body, that I did in thinking of my father who passed away recently. So kind of reflection on life. So a lot of these things, they're sort of portraits, but they're all part of bigger whole. And also the reference of the portrait being part of the body that sort of can then speak, and the complexities of life. Yeah, and one has to have a sense of humor to kind of keep looking at these things.
Yeah, they seem very alive, and they're like kind of showing off like a show and tell of their various, I won't say deformities, but maybe or extra appendages or special powers.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and also, like talking about the gaze, right? And so the idea that you're looking at the work, but it's also looking back at you. And so there's this conversation going on where, nothing is passive, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's the eyes are everywhere. I mean, they're
Yeah.
everywhere. And after like maybe a few minutes or an hour, you just get used to them. And I did, and it's like, okay, so their eyes everywhere they could be.
Right.
And then like a few days ago, I'm thinking, but they're looking at me too.
Right.
I didn't think about that until about a few days in. It's like, why are they staring at me? What's the reason,
Looking into your soul, yeah.
Yeah, and so many, and I mean, there's got to be a reason why there's so many looking at us, and then everything else has eyes. So you have the mannequin head there with the moving eyes,
Right.
and I mean it's obvious, but at the same token, like, what are we supposed to feel about that? How are we supposed to take that?
Well, it's the idea of like we're looking at them and they're looking back at us, right? So it's like, the gaze, right?
Yeah.
But eyes are also it's witnessing.
Mhm.
So, and we see things before we can speak, right? And so I feel like also, all of these things, they hold the stories and they communicate the stories through the eyes as well. So again, like going to the bodies holding stories, and they may not be telling them, but they're expressing them anyway.
Right. And that's how I saw them initially. It was like they're the seers, and we're walking through this exhibition of seers. And then, but there's a certain point where you realize like you're being seen too.
Right.
And that's like, I don't know, it's interesting when that clicks. Is there anything like the evil eye, or does that play into this at all?
No, not so much the evil No, I feel like it's more of witnessing and acknowledging and also communicating, right? Through the eye. I don't, it's not so much about superstition.
Okay, but being seen would be a thing too.
Being seen, yes, and looking back at you while you're looking at it. So yeah.
You can take comfort in it as well as,
Yeah, because you're being seen.
yeah,
Yeah.
we all want that.
Right.
So in terms of the various forms of media here, it- like and your integration here into the US and like beginning to, express yourself through art, like where did it start first?
Well, it started through painting and drawing. And in fact, when I was studying as an undergrad, I thought that I was a painter. Um, and in some way, I feel like I'm still a painter. I'm just like trying to push paintings into different realms. So, like in some way, the music boxes, they're paintings, but it's an action. It's a painting, it's a performer, it's in attraction. I love like interaction with the viewers so that, it's the performance that's done specifically for the person who is watching it. Um, and also like even the sculptural elements, there's a lot of painting in them, and definitely with animations, which are all painting based. So, so even though, sorry, I have a bit of a cold. Um, even though there are different mediums, they all also interplay with one another. And
Right.
when I do performances, it's also like a projection where I'm part um, of the of the projection.
Right,
So,
yeah.
um,
And in the music boxes,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But I guess it's all an art, and you're just like putting everything together, however it goes,
Right.
to get to that final point.
Yeah.
Um, and in terms of this like experience layer, where we're walking through this environment, um, like when did that start to become, part of your practice, and
The
like, and what is that?
installation.
Yeah, the installation. How does like, could you do this without the installation, or is that very essential?
Well, it's my favorite part.
Yeah.
I feel like I love the experience where you go inside and you really experience work from being inside. So being surrounded by it. So in fact, doing installation here, I just really love that part, and um, I want to do more of it. But
Yeah.
it's also when I do projections, I try to also do like surrounding installations. So I don't know, there's something about being inside of the artwork that I don't know, is most gratifying to me.
I think it's what keeps people in here for a while once they stop in, because you do feel like you're bouncing around in this world, and you've got the things that are miniature but still like very intricate, and feeling alive as well.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of in this show, like what did you include or try in the show that you hadn't before that you're excited about?
Well, I feel like these larger figures, these were done specifically for the show, and that's the first time I included, well, for a while. Like I've done something like this before, but I stopped. Um, and so that's is very exciting for me to kind of, go back to a larger sculptures. And some of them have the costumes that I performed in. So, and some of them don't. But I don't know. I feel like working large scale is very nice.
When being human scale is
Yeah.
really incredibly special, because like you do it engages so much more,
Mm-hmm.
and it does remind you that there were costumes as well.
Yeah.
um I think they really make this place alive. um and then in terms of there's one thing that's like on the tip of my tongue, and I have to like actually look. So so is the matter of factness of everything. Like the figures on the wall they're just so bizarre in the scheme of things, and the face there with so many eyes.
Right.
Nothing is like, and all these figures here. there's nothing that says like this is going to be unusual or weird or and they don't announce themselves. They're just there, and it doesn't take but like a minute or so to feel like totally at home with all these characters, and it's like, and then you look at like someone else's paintings, and you're like, oh well, that's just like a regular like family or group of people or whatever. Like, how do you make it seem so natural and just so normal?
Well, I feel like it's going back to the absurdity,
Yeah.
right? And in some way, kind of, when things are no longer linear,
Yeah.
then everything sort of is making sense. And in some way, I feel like these are like the family members, in fact, I thought, like these creatures in the back, these are like the family members that are just hanging out in my studio and like observing what I'm doing.
Totally.
Um, so they don't seem strange or out of ordinary to me. And and part of it is also just like having fun with different things. They're supposedly not meant to be together. I don't know. In some way, I feel like the strange, like fruit-like, characters seem more realistic to me than some of the things that if I were to paint like a human face.
Yeah, I could see that.
Mm.
Well, and you get to just like, make it a star fruit or something, as
Yeah.
opposed to like trying to, well, am I going to make him attractive or not? Or, like, and then you gave one of
Right.
them a cat, and I thought that was really,
What's that?
one of them has a cat. And that's
Oh
really
yeah,
sweet.
yeah, the cats. No, I have two cats, so yeah, they're definitely part of my experience. And in fact, I feel like this cat particular one has like big lips, and one of my cats, I think she has like almost like painted lips. You can always see them.
I noticed the painted lips.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was a fun little arrangement to put together. I had to like invent a scenario of like this kind of nightlife mobster like environment,
Right.
with the pumpkin face figure like taking calls for everybody.
Right. She's like arranging everyone to get together.
Yeah.
It would have been a fun party to go to.
It really would have been. Yeah. I felt like you would like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a good move.
And then there was one other thing I wanted to ask about. So, well, the figures are absurd, and they're like, it does lighten the mood a little bit, but we did talk about like the trauma and like how the body speaks before the words come out. Tell me more about like how that enters the picture.
Well, I feel like in that way, like the eyes, right?
Yeah.
The eyes represent, like the traumatic also, and like witnessing to the things that happen. So, but it's not so much, again, like it's not so much like the event, but like what happens after, like in the resilience. So that's what I'm mostly interested in. And so, the stories and, they're part of the work. Um, but it's like, but it's not like the focus, right? The trauma is
Right.
not the focus.
Well, because each one of these characters there have something, and there are
Right.
stories behind them, but they're not. They're just kind of announcing themselves. They've put some of that behind them. They found a place for the story, more or less.
Right. And then, like, what do you like, if something happens, right? Like things fall apart, like then, you kind of make to do with whatever's around, right? And so it becomes like this sort of, strange composition of things.
Is that sort of kind of like the thing that we should learn or could learn from like encountering like these stories and these figures? Is that like you find a place and then you take it with you and move on to the next thing? Or, I mean, what do we do with that?
And explain what you.
Okay, so like like when I'm looking at this group here, I see that like some of them are like, we'll say, disfigured, or some of them are mourning, some of them are, I mean, it's all kinds of things that maybe a lot of people have phobias of, or fears, and they're almost like showing them off with pride. I mean, definitely, I think in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So is that something that like we look through and we say, oh, okay, will this happen? I'm going to like make this a part of my being, and like move forward and be proud of it, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, each painting represents different things. So there is a story, behind each work. I mean, for example, and some of them, it's not like you won't necessarily know, like, this is what it is. Like, for example, the blue figure in the middle there. This one I painted after Navalny was killed. There is no way you'll be able to tell,
No.
but I was thinking about it, and I was thinking also about, when my mom died, there was something about, so she was sick with cancer for a long time, and she died in the United States, and she didn't speak any English, and she would write a lot of letters. Like that was her way of kind of keeping herself alive. And so when I painted her after she passed away, and probably was the first painting where I did, I stepped away from literally figurative work. And probably, yeah, I just thought it, probably that's where like the absurdity really entered into my work. But it was, this image of her and the candle and like writing and how that writing kept her alive. And so I was thinking about that painting when I made the painting about Navalny, who was, a Russian leader who was killed in prison. So, so like all of these things, right? It's like it's there, but you won't necessarily think that this is what, is in the painting. And so, there's something behind, each piece. Like there's what else can I say? Like there was one with like many hands and guns
Mm-hmm.
and that was actually a piece when I was trying to meditate and I couldn't really meditate, because I keep on thinking about all these things. I'm like, well, this is what happens when you try to sit down and all different thoughts, come to your head. And it's just like this.
And that's such a weird one, the
Right. And it's
guns.
just like, you don't necessarily think of like, oh, this is peaceful meditation on a cushion. It's just like, all these different thoughts are going all over the place. So, um, so there are different sort of, and then the one, the two kind of strange looking creatures with, the skeleton with the gun. I was thinking of, like the happy couple that is trying to kind of pretend that things are okay, but like you have this like portraits, right, that we put on Instagram, and behind there's just like a hot mess.
Yeah.
So, all of these
You
things.
see that all the time, actually.
Exactly. So, like what's behind the facade of, and maybe these are the things that are behind.
That's always a good lesson, or a good thing to keep in mind. It's like you don't know what's going on,
Oh, you never know what's going on. That's one thing I've learned, that you never know. In fact, you think, some things that are the most kind of usual looking have a lot more going on behind than the other way around.
And so a lot of the works are like definitely very resolved, and I feel like probably have been things that you've worked your way into a lot of these works. Is there anything in here that like tells you like, oh, this is where I'm going next? This is like a thread that I'm going to keep, following.
Well, the eyes for some reason is something that just keeps, keep going back to. So I feel that and also incorporating writing. So writing has been always part of my work, even though like all of these paintings have writing behind it. Sometimes I cover it and sometimes I don't, but it's all just like automatic writing. So, I listen to things and I write, or just writing the thoughts. So I feel like some of that writing comes, forward more. So like with the piece behind us, all of this like black and white stuff is, it's all writing, just like layers and layers of writing. And I feel like, you know, there'll be more of it.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, all of it is
It
just.
feels kind of like gestures. Yeah.
But it gestures. It's also my handwriting is so terrible that you'll never know what I wrote. Which I don't need to hide what I write. In
Yeah.
fact, at home I like write a lot of journals. I can leave them out because nobody will. Myself included, have no idea what I wrote there. So it's kind of like plus and minus. I can never go back to like years back and like, oh, that's what I was thinking about. I have like no idea. I was thinking about something. But I really love that, putting writing and the thoughts and this energy in the work. And so like with these flowers too, they're all
Oh yeah.
writing. So there's writing. So I had like, paper on the wall, and I just did a lot of writing, and then, in black and white and red, and then so a lot of it. And then, I cut them up into flowers. So I feel like the energy is there and just like the thoughts, and but it becomes a pattern.
Yeah. It's so weird how things reveal themselves. Like I did not notice those were words until now. I
Yeah.
was thinking like they reminded me of like eyelashes. And then
Yeah,
I
they're like
realized too, like,
patterns,
yeah,
right? But they are words.
that's that's amazing. I think like everybody that's been to the show needs to come back and
Hmm.
like look at very closely at everything.
Yeah.
Is there anything that like I've missed in this conversation that like you would have wanted to talk about?
I don't know. Maybe do you guys have
Yeah.
any questions?
Yeah, okay. Throughout the whole talk, I was just so curious about what your own creative process looks like in your studio practice. Can I say there's such range here? So it's kind of amazing to me that you're tackling all of these things at once, some of the different materials and mediums. So I'm just curious, and yeah, what you can just say about that.
Yeah, I like working on a couple of things at the same time. And I feel like when I get stuck on something, I just move on to the next thing. And so I I feel like working on in different mediums really keeps me engaged. Um, and the paintings, it's easier to kind of start and finish, but everything else takes time. Like the music box, I have to, design it, and then we need to go, work with an engineer, with Ted Johnson, like he does his part, then, composer, Evgeny Charlotte, and comes back to me. And so it's like a longer process. It will take months, before we can see like what it actually looks at the end. With animation too, that takes forever. So meanwhile, I can do something else that is quicker. Performances too that take, a long time to develop. So I just really love working on different things at the same time. Um, so that's
So do you find your intention is sustained over long periods of time?
yes,
Have variety things going on at once?
yes. Yeah, because I also am impatient, so I don't like when things take a long time. So for me to wait for something, I need to like have something that I can finish. Yeah. And sometimes, as I'm working on one thing, the ideas about another then come, and then things inform each other. Um, yeah.
I was fascinated by the intentionality behind how many eyes there were. It was also something that I didn't notice until you spoke more on it. And I was wondering if there was the same kind of intentions behind some of the figures in the paintings not having any eyes, especially since now that I'm looking, a lot of them are the ones that have dashido or like objects are like part of them. And I was just wondering if there was any thought behind leaving out the eyes on some of the figures.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few that don't have the eyes. But it's then it's more about like the internal space, right? So when it's not about like looking, then it's like what's happening inside. So yeah, it is intentional. But eyes is there's a lot more of the work that has the eyes. And they always look at you. So I have very rarely when things look away.
When the lettuce or cabbage face, like the two of them look like they almost don't have eyes, but then they're like peeking
Yeah,
through.
and then they're peeking through. Yeah.
These are like they remind me of David Lynch movies.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
David Lee. But he is also a painter. He was.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's why, and you can see it in his films. Every single shot is like a painting. It's very intentional. That's why I think as a visual artist, it's like a treat to look at his work.
any other influences while we're at it?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of artists that I really love. I mean, Kentridge is just like I just, but so it's such a labor intensive all of his, drawings and animations, but I love how he also works with the cross media. Um there's this Czech filmmaker. There's Brothers Quay. I love their animations for sure. Also like really quirky and weird. Yeah, I mean definitely a lot of Soviet animation.
And then further reading, because we talked about this while we were setting up
Right.
the books. Like,
Yeah. I mean, obviously Kafka is like my favorite. I mean, the whole story about like the guy waking up as a bug.
yeah, it's so gross.
I mean that, but you can like,
yeah.
it's also like you can imagine, that whole. I just like listened to that story recently again, but it's also like describes, the existence, of one's life, right? And you just, what is it like to wake up one day and then to find yourself stuck.
Yeah, and when things get like slow and weird, sometimes you find yourself in that existential, like, what is this
The
anyway?
existential reality, right? And yeah, no, for sure.
And you want to like transform into something from the show, probably just make it interesting.
Right. And I personally am very much afraid of cockroaches. So
Oh
for
my
me,
God, now you can't.
yeah.
No.
Will be a nightmare to wake up as one big one.
No, I wouldn't like anything but a cockroach. Like
Right.
something else.
Something else, like vegetable, much better.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Just stay away from the cockroaches.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also like with vegetables, it's all about, like the decay, right? And that being like part of life. And so like the growth and decay and, what is it like to sort of, be part of that experience.
And then there's the renewal that follows, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a question on me, the concept of wholeness. And I think you mentioned it a bit about the Instagram idea of wholeness, which I think represents something about where we are today as a society, called wholeness is almost something you attain at some point. Do you think of wholeness as something that's separate to good and bad? Like, for example, when you mentioned having an illness, you might have that's still part of the whole. Is that something where that wholeness is still something that's embraced? It's not about being good or bad?
Yeah, I don't really think of things as being good or bad. I feel like it's all, there's good and bad in everything. And it's always like, how do you look at things? So it is embracing, all of it, right? And there's, there's like a curated experience and there's our experience, right? And so it's like looking at, into the parts that maybe are not so pleasant to look at and finding beauty in that too. And also finding like ugliness in the beautiful things. So so I feel like there's a complexity in our experience. And so that's why I'm trying to also show like how it is about complexity and kind of the new wholeness, right? Not the wholeness that we kind of imagine as children, but like what does it look like after that fantasy sort of is no longer there. And there's beauty in that too.
It's actually very optimistic as well, because we're all whole
Right.
all the time.
All the time, exactly.
And it feels positive as well, like this exhibition.
I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah. Yeah, because it's, again, like it's not so much like looking at like the traumas or, it's like, it's about like oh my God, what's the word just escaped from me? The resilience, and the hope too. So it's, that's what I'm really looking at.
I just have one other question about hope.
Right.
Means, I was just wondering how you think about hope and how that informs your art.
I mean, it's a complicated question, right? Of home, like what is home? There was like a time in my life when I'm like, where the toothbrush is, that's where the home is. And I feel like, once you leave like home, then it becomes very fluid. So So yeah, I feel like at some point anything and everything becomes home. I don't like, I have a home, right? And I create home for my family, but it's not as permanent as maybe what I felt when I was growing up. And especially, in Russia, like in Moscow where I grew up, like generations live in one home. Here, people move around all the time, and I moved so much that the idea of like what home is shifting. Um,
Making like wholeness.
yeah,
Like
so
a
it's
sort
like
of yeah.
yeah, so home can be like where you create home, right? Um, and it's more expensive than what I used to think of it.
You mentioned you have like a background in music, so yeah, there, like if that influences any part of your visuals.
Yeah, for sure. So I think because of that, I really love collaboration with people from other fields, specifically composers. And, I'm also married to composers, so that's helpful to have exposure to a lot of composers, himself included. Um, but I feel like, because of that, I really appreciate this additional storytelling that happens through music, and the collaboration. So, also work with dancers, and with, engineers. And so I think having that background helped me to embrace, different not genres, but different, creative forms, and create one form with, with different aspects of it. So um I used to be able to sing. Now my voice is just completely shot, so that's too bad. But I would have included more of the singing too. I used to. Um, so anyway,
Do you get any like creative directions in the house or something, like especially for the animation?
I feel like when there's a performance involved, the creative direction where I need to hear the cue so I know what to do next, which sometimes is not taken very positively because they're like in the middle of their whatever they're developing, and now like I need the cue right here. I had like when I worked with one particular composer, we had a lot of discussion about it. But honestly, I when I work with composers, I work with them because I love what they do. So I really trust what they come up with. And there's a lot of freedom. Like I don't want to kind of dictate. We talk about things, and then I've never had a situation. Well, once I had a situation where I didn't know the composer, and then they came up with something, and from then on I want to make sure that if I ask a composer, I know ahead of time whom I'm working with, and then I let them lead the way. So yeah.
I'm just like struck by like this part of the conversation. It's like you're living like a very artful life. I mean, there's no question. I mean, it's very obvious, but it's interesting. Like you could never not make art, obviously.
No, I feel like for me it's also like a life necessity,
Yeah.
because I make work, but I feel like it's like my survival, my survival mechanism. Like I have to make work. There was a time when I didn't, and I was very unhappy. And I feel like if I'm not making work, then people around me will suffer. So it's better if I make.
And you're an example of someone who's like actually actively like moving to the next art thing, and like and they all work together, and it's like some people wouldn't believe that that's actually a thing that people do, and it's nice to hear the stories.
Yeah, no, I think it's important. And my kids, when they were little, I would have them even participate in my work as performers. Now they don't want to anymore. And I still think maybe I can engage them in one way or the other. But it's like, life becomes art, art becomes life. Like everything is part of the experience.
And that
So
is an interdisciplinary way that you do it, with music and like performance and like memory and like writing
yeah.
and and then teaching. I mean, it's like
Right.
that's so. I mean, it is actually really cool. I mean, I'm just saying.
Teaching is also
Yeah.
part of, it's a creative process.
Yeah.
And you have to become a performer too. In some, it's like a different kind of performance, but they have like 30 students looking at you like, entertain me.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that we had this show.
Yeah, thank you.
It's such an exciting show to be inside, and I'm glad we have more time for it, and that hope everyone comes back.
Yeah,
and
please do.
and we'll have these videos as well. So thank you again.
Thank
and,
you.
Can't wait to see what happens next,
Yeah.
and to be a part of it if we can too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.